Hello, my name is Leo and welcome to another reading of The Elder Scrolls. Today we're going to be reading A Dance in Fire, Chapter 2 by Worgen Jarth. It was a complete loss. The Cathay Rant had stolen or destroyed almost every item of value in the caravan in just a few minutes' time. Demicus Scotty's wagon load of wood he had hoped to trade with the Bosmer had been set on fire and then toppled off the bluff. His clothing and contracts were tattered and ground into the mud of dirt mixed with spilt wine. All the pilgrims, merchants, and adventurers in the groups moaned and wept as they gathered the remnants of their belongings by the rising sun of the dawn. What just happened? I don't remember. What just happened in the last chapter? I need to just double check. Hang on. Okay. So it didn't actually... They came, they attacked. I don't remember reading this. You did read it. Okay, I'll believe you. Anyway, carry on, sorry. If you needed a quick recap, then I'm afraid you're just gonna have to watch the first chapter again. I best not tell anyone that I managed to hold on to my notes for my translation of the Morrowind play bar, whispered the poet Griff Manon. They'd probably turn on me. Scotty politely declined the opportunity of telling Malin just how little value he himself placed on the man's property. Instead, he counted the coins in his purse, 34 gold pieces. Wow. Very little indeed for an entrepreneur beginning a new business. Hoi! Came a cry from the wood. A small party of Bosmer emerged from the thicket, clad in leather mail and bearing arms. Friend or foe? Neither, growled the convoy ahead. You might be the Cyrodiils, laughed the leader of the group, a tall, skeleton-thin youth with a sharp, vulpine face. We heard you en route. Evidently, so did our enemies. I thought the war was over. Wait, I thought the war was over, muttered one of the caravan's now ruined merchants. The Bosmer laughed again. No act of war, just a little border enterprise. Are you going on to Fantasy? I'm not. The convoy head shook his head. That's kind of a weird sentence. The convoy head shook his head. As far as I'm concerned, my duty is done. No more horses, no more caravan, just a fat profit loss to me. The men and women crowded around the man, protesting, threatening, begging, but he refused to step foot in Valenwood. If these were the new times of peace, he said, he'd rather come back for the next war. Scotty tried a different route and approached the Bosmer. He spoke with an authoritative but friendly voice, the kind he used in negotiations with peevish carpenters. I don't suppose you'd consider escorting me to Facility? You gotta figure out how to pronounce that word. Falinsti. There you go. I'm a representative for an important imperial agency, the Arturius Building Commission, here to help repair and alleviate some of the problems the war with the Khajiit brought to your province. Patriotism. Oh no, he's about to start a new sentence and then he got cut off. Patriotism, 20 gold pieces, and you must carry your own gear if you have any left, replied the Bosmer. Well, 20 pieces is pretty cheap, so... Scotty reflected that negotiations with peevish carpenters rarely went his way either. 6 eager people had enough gold on them for payment. Among those without funds was the poet, who appealed to Scotty for assistance. I'm sorry, Griff. I only have 14 gold left over. Not even enough for a decent room when I get to Falinsti. Yes, sorry, I keep fucking that up. I really would help you if I could, said Scotty, persuading himself that it was true. The band of 6 and their Bosomer escorts began the descent down the rocky path along the bluff. Within an hour's time, they were deep in the jungles of Valenwood. A never-ending canopy of hues of browns and greens obscured the sky. A millennia's worth of fallen leaves formed a deep, wormy sea of putrefaction beneath their feet. Ugh. Several miles were crossed, wading through the slime. For several more, they took a labyrinthian path across fallen branches and low-hanging boughs? Sure. Of giant trees. All the while, hour after hour, the inexhaustible Bosomer... Bosomer. I think I've been pronouncing it Bosomer the whole time. Hang on a second. Is that a different spelling to how they spelled it before? No? It's just... well, whatever. I'm calling them Bosomers. Fair enough. I think that is the official pronunciation. I'm not sure. Whatever. All the while, hour after hour, the inexhaustible Bosomer host moved so fast, the Cyrodiil struggled to keep from being left behind. A red-faced little merchant with short legs took a bad step on a rotten branch and nearly fell. His fellow provincials had to help him up. The Bosomer paused only a moment, their eyes continually darting to the shadows in the trees above, before moving on at their usual expeditious pace. "What are they so nervous about?" wheezed the merchant irritably. "More Cathay Rand?" "Don't be ridiculous," laughed the Bosomer unconventionally. "Could cheat this far into Valenwood in times of peace? They never dare." When the group passed high enough above the swamp that the smell was somewhat dissipated, Scotty felt a sudden pang of hunger. He was used to 4 meals a day in the Cyrodiilic custom. 4 meals a day? So what? Breakfast, brunch, afternoon, tea, and dinner, I guess. Or maybe breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert. Or late night dessert, whatever. Hours of non-stop exertion without food was not part of his regimen as a comfortably paid clerk. He pondered, feeling somewhat delirious, how long they had been trotting through the jungle. 12 hours? 20? A week? That's a bit much, dude. Time was meaningless. Sunlight was only sporadic through the vegetative, thank you, ceiling. Oh God, you can do it. For phosphorescent molds on the trees in the muck below provided the only regular illumination. "Is it at all possible for us to rest and eat?" he hollered to his host up ahead. "We're near the Falinsti," came the echoing reply. "Lots of food there." The path continued upward for several hours, more across a clot of fallen logs, rising up to the first and then the second boughs of the tree line. As they rounded a long corner, the travellers found themselves midway up a waterfall that fell 100 feet or more. How did that happen? No one had the energy to complain as they began pulling up the stacks of rocks, agonizing foot by foot. The Bosomer escorts disappeared into the mist, but Scotty kept climbing until there was no more rock left. He wiped the sweat and river water from his eyes. Falinsti spread across the horizon before him. Sprawling across both banks of the river stood the mighty Grat Oak City, with groves and orchards of lesser trees crowding it like supplicants before their king. On a lesser scale, the tree that formed the moving city would have been extraordinary. gnarled and twisted, with a glorious crown of golden green, dripping with vines and shining with sap. At a mile tall and half as wide, it was the most magnificent thing Scotty had ever seen. If he had not been a starving man with the soul of a clerk, he would have sung. "There you are," said the leader of the escorts. "Not too far a walk. You should be glad it's wintertide and summertide. The city's on the far... Wait, what? In summertime, the city's on the far south end of the province." Scotty was lost as to how to proceed. The sight of the vertical metropolis, where people moved about like ants, disoriented all of his sensibilities. Wait, what? What? He said it's wintertide. In summertime, the city's on the far south of the... Yeah, it moves. We'll get to that. I think the book talks about that. This weird city, quote unquote, is a moving tree. Oh. You wouldn't know of an inn called... He paused for a moment and then pulled Joris's letter from his pocket. Something like Mother Pascos Tavern? Mother Pascost? Pascost? The lead bossomer laughed his familiar, contemptuous laugh. You won't want to stay there? Question mark. Why is that a question mark? Visitors always prefer the Alicia Hall in the top boroughs. It's expensive, but very nice. I'm meeting someone at Mother Pascot's Tavern. If you made up your mind to go, take a lift to Havel Slump and ask for directions there. Just don't get lost and fall asleep in the Western Cross. This apparently struck the youth's friends as a very witty jest, and so was with their laughter echoing behind them as Scotty crossed the writhing root system to the base of Fetistini. I'm just going to name it different every time. Sure. The ground was littered with leaves and refuse, and from moment to moment a glass or bone would plummet from far above. So he walked with his neck crooked to have warning. An intricate network of platforms anchored to thick vines slipped up and down the slick trunk of the city with perfect grace, manned by operators with arms as thick as an ox's belly. Scotty approaches the nearest fellow at one of the platforms, who was idly smoking from a glass pipe. I was wondering if you might take me to Havel Slump? The man nodded, and within a few minutes' time, Scotty was 200 feet in the air at a crook between two mighty branches. Curled webs of moss stretched unevenly across the fork, forming a sharing roof for several dozen small buildings. There were only a few souls in the alley, but around the bend ahead, you could hear the sound of music and people. Scotty tipped the Fausty platform ferryman a gold piece and asked for the location of Mother Pascot's Tavern. Straight ahead of you, sir, but you won't find anyone there, the ferryman explained, pointing in the direction of the noise. Mundus, everyone. Mundus? Mundus, everyone in Havel Slump has... Oh. I think what he's trying to say is, on Mundus, which is Monday, everyone in Havel Slump has revelry. Revelry. You don't hear that word very often, do you? Scotty walked... Well, this book has got a lot of revelry in it. This series, anyway. Scotty walked carefully along the narrow street. Though the ground felt as solid as the marble avenues of the Imperial City. There were slick cracks in the bark that exposed fatal drops into the river. He took a moment to sit down, to rest and get used to the view from the heights. It was a beautiful city for certain, but it took Scotty only a few minutes of contemplation to rise up in alarm. A jolly little raft, anchored downstream below him, had distinctively moved several inches while he watched it. but it hadn't moved at all. He had, together with everything around him. It was no metaphor. The city of Falsitetti walked, and considering its size, it moved quickly. Scotty rose to his feet and into a cloud of smoke that drifted out from around the bend. It was the most delicious roast, oh man, now I'm hungry, he had ever smelled. The clerk forgot his fear and ran. The revelry, as the ferryman had termed it, took place on an enormous platform tied to the tree, wide enough to be a plaza in any other city. A fantastic assortment of the most amazing people Scotty had ever seen were jammed shoulder to shoulder together, many eating, many more drinking, and some dancing to a lustist and singer perched on an offshoot above the crown. They were largely Bossamer, true natives clad in colourful leather and bones, with a close minority of orcs, whirling through the throng, dancing and bellowing at one another, were a hideous ape people. Wait, did he just refer to the orcs as apes? Racist, whatever. A few heads bobbing over the tops of the crowds belonged not, as Scotty first assumed, to very tall people, but to a family of centaurs. Centaurs? Really? Care for some mutton? Queried a wizened old Mer who roasted an enormous beast on some red-hot rocks. Fuck yeah, dude. Scotty quickly paid him a gold piece and devoured the leg he was given. And then another gold piece and another leg. Sounds delicious. Reminds of that time that I went to Universal Studios Japan, and you could buy like turkey legs. And I had one, and the person I was with had one, and they didn't finish it, so I ate both of them. It was great. Anyway, it was a shame that how much were those things? They were like, whatever, they were ridiculously expensive. They weren't a gold piece, that's for sure. Maybe 8 gold pieces, maybe 8? Were they 800 yen? I think they were like that. They were expensive. Regardless, they were like a full meal, except they weren't. They were the cost of a full meal, yes. The fellow chuckled when Scotty began choking on a piece of gristle and handed him a mug of a frothing white drink. He drank it and felt a quiver run through his body as if he were tickled. What is that? Scotty asked. Jagger, fermented pig's milk. I can let you have a flagon of it for a bit more, and a bit more mutton for another gold. Scotty agreed, paid, gobbled down the meat, and took the flagon with him as he slipped into the crowd. His co-worker... Wait, his co-worker's here? And his name's Leo. His co-worker, Leonides Jewess, the man who had told him to come to Valorwood. Oh, okay, he was already there. Right, was nowhere to be seen. Okay. Not actually there. When the flagon was a quarter empty, Scotty stopped looking for Jewess. When it was half empty, he was dancing with a group, oblivious to the broken planks and gaps in the fencework. At 3/4 empty, he was trading jokes with a group of creatures whose language was completely alien to him. By the time the flagon was completely drained, he was asleep, snoring, while the reverie continued all around his supine body. The next morning, still asleep, Scotty had the sensation of someone kissing him. Now we're talking. He made a face to return the favour, but a pain like fire spread through his chest, forcing him to open his eyes. There was an insect the size of a large calf sitting on him, crushing him, its spiky legs holding him down, while a central spiral-bladed vortex of a mouth tore through his shirt. Ugh! He screamed and thrashed, but the beast was too strong. It had found its meal and was going to finish it. It's over, thought Scotty wildly. I should have never left home. I could have stayed in the city and perhaps found work with Lord Vanch. I could have begun again as a junior clerk and worked my way back up. Suddenly the mouth released itself. The creature shivered once, expelled a burst of yellow bile, and died. Ugh. Got one! Cried a voice not too distantly. For a moment, Scotty lay still, His head throbbed, and his chest burned. Out of the corner of his eyes, he saw movement. Another of the horrible monsters was scurrying towards him. He scrambled, trying to push himself free, but before he could come out, there was the sound of a bow cracking, and an arrow pierced the second insect. "Good shot!" cried another voice. "Get the first one again. I just saw it move a little." This time, Scotty felt the impact of the bolt hit the carcass. He cried out, but he could hear how muffled his voice was by the beetle's body. Cautiously, he tried sliding a foot out and rolling under, but the movement apparently had the effect of convincing the archers that the creature still lived. A volley of arrows was launched forth. Now the beast was sufficiently proliferated so pools of its blood, and likely the blood of its victims, began to seep out onto Scotty's body. Ugh. When Scotty was a lad, before he grew too sophisticated for such sports, he had often gone to the Imperial Arena, name of the first game, for the competitions of war. He recalled a great veteran of the fights, when asked, telling him his secret: "Whenever I'm in doubt of what to do, and I have a shield, I stay behind it." Scotty followed that advice. After an hour? Jesus Christ! When he no longer heard the arrows being fired, he threw aside the remains of the bug and leapt as quickly as he could to a stand. It was not a moment too soon. A gang of 8 archers had their bows pointed his direction, ready to fire. When they saw him, they laughed. "Didn't anyone ever tell you not to sleep in the Western Cross? How are we going to exterminate all the halvers if you drunks keep feeding them?" Scotty shook his head and walked back to the platform, round the bend to Havel's slump. He was bloodied and torn and tired, and he had had far too much fermented pig's milk. All he wanted was a proper place to lie down. He stepped into Mother Pascot's tavern, a dank place, wet with sap, smelling of mildew. "My name is Demetrius Scotty," he said. "I was hoping you'd have someone named Juris staying here." "Demetrius Scotty?" pondered the fleshy proprietress, Mother Pascot herself. Oh, that's who it was. Right? "I've heard that name. Oh, you must be the fellow we left the note for. Let me go see if I can find him." Oh, that's the end. That's the end. Well, tune in to Chapter 3 to find out what happens to our good friend Demetrius Scotty. For now, my name is Leo, and I will see you next time.